Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Namaskar. Welcome to online refresher course in English language teaching. We have talked about various aspects of English language teaching. Friends, we tried to look at curriculum designs, syllabuses, mobile apps, computer-aided language learning, technology-aided language learning, and we are touching the most basic and important parts of language teaching, that is LSRW, that is listening, speaking, reading and writing. When it comes to listening, listening is the most important and basic skill in the development of language competence. This module aims to discuss how successfully we can teach listening in the classroom and outside the classroom. Importance of listening as a language skill and its significance in language acquisition. Listening is not merely a physical activity, but it involves proper understanding of body language, paralinguistic features, situation and context, etc. It is very important to look at these different aspects. When you listen to somebody, suppose you are looking at me and you are listening me. It's not just you are listening my words. You are looking at me also, my body language, my eye contact, how I look at you. That also makes a lot of difference. Further discussing language spoken in the classroom and the language spoken in real life situation. Purposes of listening are elaborated in the module. The module also discusses about role of a teacher, comprehensible language input and various stages of listening a lesson, focused listening and learners' responses while doing listening activities. The module also describes several listening practice opportunities available outside the classroom. Friends, it is not always necessary that you get ample opportunities as far as contexts and situations are concerned in classroom, because generally classrooms are set up in the same way. There are four walls and we are sitting in four walls. We have the same setup. The teacher is here, students are there. Maybe sometimes we try some different things, like we can ask them to sit in a round table, we can ask them to sit in groups, or sometimes we can take outside the class also. But when we take them outside of the class, most of the cases we take them walls of the school or in the walls of colleges only, not outside the walls. There are very few instances where we can get our students or we can take our student outside of the walls of the college or the institution. But what happens in reality? When will they pass out? When will they complete their course? They have to face the world, which is not inside the walls, which is outside the walls, which is outside the corridors. And there they have to perform. So it is very important to look at the outside listening as well. With elaborating on fundamental principles of teaching listening, the module also presents several tasks for better understanding and practice. And friends, I am very happy that today when we are going to talk on listening, we have a very good and experienced resource person with us who really worked a lot as far as listening and speaking is concerned. He worked on different aspects of listening. He works with different media houses. He works with different kind of associations where he provides his voiceover and had to professionally record for several things also. So I guess he is one of the person who understand listening really very nicely. I would like to invite Dr. Jayesh Manka to talk on listening. Welcome, Jayesh ji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Dr. Jayesh Manka is Assistant Professor in English and Department of English at GLS Sadguna and BD College for Arts, Ahmedabad. GLS is one of prominent name in education in Gujarat and Ahmedabad. It's known as Gujarat Law Society. Gujarat University recognized PG teacher and UG teacher having more than 14 years of teaching experience. Dr. Manka really works very effectively as a teacher. He had his MPhil degree from Gujarat University. He worked on Shakespeare's Othello, a study in the light of Rasa principle. He is a blend of Indian kind of studies and British kind of studies. He earned his PhD also from Gujarat University. He worked on humanism as reflected in the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore and Walt Whitman. Here he tried to look at American literature and Indian literature as a blend, as a comparative study, and from different perspectives. He has presented several research articles, research papers at international and national conferences, seminars, and some of them got published in journals of national and international repute. He has delivered his scholarly lectures as a resource person at various conferences, seminars, workshops, and training programs. He is empaneled for Sardar Patel Institute of Public Administration as subject expert in English. He reviewed and corrected English language of textbooks for Standard 12 Sociology. He is the academic counselor of MA English at Indira Gandhi Open University. He is empaneled and approved oral examiner for Bullard's speaking test examination by Cambridge Essol, United Kingdom, UK. News for Gujarat Law Society run for all academic institutions affiliated to them. He is a member of English Language Teachers Association of India. He is a life member of Gujarat University English Teachers Association. He is a life member of Comparative Literature Association of India, Gujarat Itihas Parishad, and he is an approved drama artist at All India Radio, Ahmedabad. So we got such a resource person who will make our listening really very interesting. Once again, I would like to welcome Dr. Jayesh Manka to talk on listening. What areas you would like to cover, Jayesh ji, in listening?
See, listening is very basic and important language skill, which is much ignored for so many years.
Very true.
So I think the time has ripened that we must focus on teaching listening properly in our schools and colleges, because it is very crucial, whether it is your social life or your professional life, whether you are student or teacher or lawyer or doctor, whoever you may be. But if you are effective listener, you can, you create your career, your personality, and you have your say among people.
Very true.
So if you want to become an effective speaker, you have to understand the nuances of effective listening.
True.
You should be a good listener to get knowledge, because earlier, even today, as a student, you have to listen to your teachers and lecturers very carefully if you want to earn some knowledge.
As they are listening us.
Yeah, very much. So when you try to learn new knowledge, new language, you have to be very attentive, very focused while listening. So listening is a tool to enrich your knowledge, to enrich your personality, and get yourself success.
So you are going to add several things which will improve their listening, and how can they improvise upon listening skill, and at the same time how our teachers, our peers, our fellow professors can teach listening effectively in the classroom. I guess these are the areas you are going to cover.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yes. So I guess, friends, it will be very interesting session. So let's listen to him.
Listening is the most important and basic skill in the development of language competence. This module aims to discuss how successfully we can teach listening in the classroom and outside the classroom. The module begins with pondering over importance of listening as a language skill and its significance in language acquisition. Listening is not merely a physical activity, but it involves proper understanding of body language, paralinguistic features, situation and context, etc. Further, discussing language spoken in the classrooms and the language spoken in the real life situations, purposes of listening are elaborated in the module. The module also discusses about role of a teacher, comprehensible language input, and various stages of listening a lesson, focused listening and learners' responses while doing listening activities. Several tasks regarding teaching and testing of listening skills in the classroom have been discussed in detail. The module also describes several listening practice opportunities available outside the classroom. With elaborating on fundamental principles of teaching listening, the module also presents several tasks for better understanding and practice. Thus, the module enables the teacher to get knowledge about various aspects of teaching listening and inspire for further study and application. This module enables the teacher to acquire knowledge about teaching listening English in and outside classroom. By the end of learning this course, a teacher will be able to know importance of listening as a language skill. He will get knowledge about principles and practice of teaching listening English in and outside classroom situations. He will also learn how to help students acquire communicative competence through language input, listening comprehension, and its evaluation. With the help of this module, the teacher can motivate the students to do self-assessment by using certain rubrics. He will know how to evaluate learners' response using various listening activities. He will also acquire knowledge to use innovative practices in classroom teaching. Further, he will be able to formulate the evaluation practices or progress check and create discussion forum for listening comprehension. The module also helps teachers to get knowledge of reference materials and contemporary trends regarding teaching listening English language. First of all, we shall try to understand the importance of listening as a language skill. Listening is the most important skill in the development of language competence. It is considered as the basic input skill in language learning. Effective speaking is possible only if listening is performed well. When one begins his life as a student, listening to his teachers becomes the most crucial factor in the process of learning. Listening has been regarded conventionally as being of lesser importance to three other language skills. Our language proficiency can be tested better through the productive skills of speaking and writing. So the receptive skills of reading and listening are given less importance. Earlier, it was not given much importance to listening. Hence, it has not much older tradition of theory and practice compared to three other language skills. We should keep this fact in our mind while devising various tools, strategies, and approaches for teaching listening. Much of students' language input normally comes from what they hear, and if listening is not properly taken care of, then students will learn less new language. For the development of language acquisition, comprehensible language input is very important, and language input rests primarily on listening and in addition on reading. Thus, developing listening skills is even more important than speaking skills, because language acquisition begins with listening activities. Now let us discuss the difference between hearing and listening. Listening and speaking are like two sides of a coin. They are very much related and dependent to each other. It is mistakenly assumed that if someone can hear, then he can listen. We have to hear whether we wish or not, but we can make our choice whether we listen or not. Of course, hearing is the ability to receive sound via ears, while listening is purposive behavior which involves a complicated process of decoding those sounds to understand and respond. Thus, good listening involves not only ears and eyes, but it also involves our intellect. Let us try to understand what is more important, speaking or listening. Many language programs intentionally or accidentally devote more attention to speaking skills than to listening skills. But an emphasis on speaking at the cost of listening results in a slower and more difficult learning process. Having less exposure to listening, they can understand almost nothing that they hear from native speakers. The speaking skills in that situation are virtually useless because one has no idea what to say. Naturally, this is quite humiliating for someone who has spent quite a long period in learning spoken English. In contrast, students having good listening skills, though they do not speak well, can generally at least keep a conversation by occasionally responding with simple questions, short replies, or even grunts and nods. Now, purposes of listening. There are two main purposes of listening: to be well informed and to get pleasure. Listening also intended to evaluate, to criticize, and to predict, etc. When we listen with the purpose of getting information, we carefully try to listen to each and every word. And when the purpose of listening is to develop an overall understanding of the content, we may or may not bother to know the meaning of each and every word. Sometimes, both these kinds of exercises are needed in order to get a comprehensive understanding. Now, let us understand what is communicative competence. Communicative competence and linguistic competence are quite different things. If someone is linguistically competent, that means one understands the language system. He knows how to make plural forms, transform sentences from active to passive, present to past, etc. All these abilities may bring success in classroom activities, but in real life situation, he may find it difficult to communicate. Linguistic proficiency is not much needed in real life situation. One only needs to convey his ideas or emotions through the medium of English language. Now let us understand the difference between language spoken in and outside classroom. If we can understand the difference between the two, we can understand why the listener's listening behavior is very weak. The real life language is distinct from classroom language because of variety in speed of utterance, prevailing contextual information, and negligible possibility of repetition. If all these aspects of real life language are assimilated into classroom language, then the language acquisition becomes clear, quick, and easy. Now, comprehending connected speech. One of the important sub-skills of listening is an ability to understand the connected speech. When we try to speak real life language fast and fluent, we may omit certain words or parts of sentences. Further, cultural and situational context also appear in real life language as connecting factor. The major thing that could enable a learner to understand all connected speeches is a treatment and varied exposure to these aspects. Now we think over obstacles while listening. For native speakers, listening is very natural and easy. So they may hardly think of the difficulties a non-native speaker faces while listening. There are many obstacles which a student faces while listening and has to overcome. He has to learn to hear subtle differences between English sounds like vowel sounds in cheer and chair, ease and ease, bitter and better, main and man. A student has to learn to grasp reduced forms of pronunciation which are very common in normal spoken English, like boys and girls for boys and girls, gonna for going to, for, ta for to, etc. A student has to learn to concentrate on intonations, on emphasis cues. Say for example, only intonation and emphasis distinguish. You want him to go. from you want him to go. A student has to learn to adjust to regional, class or group accents. A student has to learn to understand a great deal of vocabulary through listening, which they used to learn through reading. A student has to learn to understand grammar structures of the spoken language. A student has to learn to understand rapid speech, because many a times all the familiar vocabulary and grammar becomes impossible to understand when they appear in rapid speech. A student has to learn to acquire sufficient cultural background knowledge. Otherwise, they fail to grasp vitally important clues for comprehending a message. Now let's have one task. We may find out difference between language in real life situation and in classrooms. We may form two groups and ask them to find out the difference between the language spoken in the classrooms and the language spoken in real life situation.